Welcome to the Brave Evolution podcast. I'm your host, Chantel Hampton, and this is your boost of empowerment. I am so excited to finally be back. It's taken me longer than I anticipated it would to post this first video after my very first video a couple of weeks ago, or about a month ago. I have really been in this place of recalibration and reimagining what all of this is about and why I'm doing what I'm doing. There has been a season, and this is something that I mentioned in the last video, of me processing all the things that God has been showing me over the past few years, but definitely within the last year. 2023 was a year of awakening, enlightening, revelation, healing, really healing. And this year has been, a time of me gearing up to burst forth, arise and shine. And I had to heal from so much. And this video is all about being brave enough to grieve. I felt the need to really discuss the grief. And even as I'm recording this, this is April 23rd, 2024. And I really sense that there is a rebirth and a re-emerging happening, an emerging, coming out of the cocoon. But in order for you to do that, it's important to die to yourself. Part of our journey, some of us are believers, many of us may not be that are watching, but part of our journey with Christ is recognizing that we partake in his suffering. Us carrying our cross means that we die daily to ourselves. We die daily to what we necessarily want. And we follow the good shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Psalm 23. And he leads me. He makes me. It starts off with, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me besides the still waters. He restores my soul. And so I have been in the place of him making me lie down in green pastures, leading me beside the still waters, and him restoring my soul, which means that a lot of the ambition, a lot of the dreams, a lot of the expectations, a lot of the desires I've had to relinquish and leave behind in the old pasture, in the old field, and allow him to lead me into green pastures, lead me out of that place into green pastures. I have walked with him in the valley of the shadow of death. I have allowed him, and I'm learning to daily allow him to comfort me. And as I watch this rod and him carrying this rod and his staff, they comfort me, because I know he will pull that out when necessary and defend me and protect me. And so this journey of being brave enough to grieve has to do with dying to oneself. And allowing the rebirth to happen when it's supposed to. And not forcing it. Being patient. Because you know that the good shepherd is leading you through the valley of the shadow of death. and he's going to prepare a table in the presence of your enemies. He's going to prepare that table before you in the presence of your enemies. And he's going to anoint your head with oil. I love Psalm 23. I love it so much. There's so much in there that if we really ponder it, it's such a common scripture, but if we take the time to truly ponder it and apply it and see how it applies to our lives and then pray that, we will see that surely goodness and mercy does follow us in the midst of having to navigate suffering. Surely goodness and mercy will follow us all the days of our lives. And that's something that I have walked with and I've learned and I'm learning. For about, my father passed in 2019. Many of you all know this, and I've shared this before. And I thought that the grieving process began there, but it did not. Over the past couple of years, I've recognized that my grieving process started back in 2016 when I felt like, you know how animals can sense a natural disaster? They might start taking cover, or you might see like on the nature channel, you see like deer start running and things start coming out. Like they recognize or they sense what's happening in the atmosphere. Well, that tends to happen to me. And I'll never forget in 2016, I want to say it was around August, September. I'll never forget, I was on the phone with my friend, and she and I were talking, and I said, it was so abrupt, like, I need to be quiet. I don't even remember what we were talking about, but it was something scriptural. And I said, something in me jolted, and I said, I need to be quiet. Something's coming. And at the time, she didn't understand it. And it was kind of like abrupt, and it felt like a little mean probably, but I was like, something's coming. And I didn't know what that was. My 30th birthday came along. And that day or that weekend, and my father, he was having a tough time walking. And I'll never forget, like, he kept losing his balance and everything. And I was like, what's going on? His speech started slurring, and we didn't put it together that he was possibly having a stroke. We didn't think about that, or like, I think they're called ischemic strokes. But he was having the onset of that. We didn't put that together. We just noticed, and we were like trying to be there and help him up. But prior, because again, this was like September, so his birthday came up before. His birthday was September 17th. And so his birthday came up before, and this was happening around his birthday. We took him out for dinner and all that stuff. And then my birthday was next. So in October, my birthday is October 21st. So in October came around, this kept kind of happening. He kept losing his balance and everything, and his speech kept slurring and slowing down. And I was nervous, but I felt something coming. My grandmother, she and I would talk, and she said, you're concerned. She powerful lady, talk about prophet. But she was like, you're concerned. And I was like, yeah, like something's coming. And she was like, something is, like, let's pray. She's like, you're really concerned. And so I just began to pray, really just began to pray. And so even in this, it was almost like the precursor. I knew something was coming. I could sense it. I could feel it. And I got silent. He took me out for my birthday. I'll never forget, we went to this spot It was in Newton, Massachusetts, and it was like his favorite spot. It was a cologne shop. And so he had known this guy for years, JP, and we went to the cologne shop, and he picked out something for me, and he got a cane that day. Man. And it was almost like I had to remember this moment, remember this moment. I believe he was driving that day because he always drove. My mom, very rarely would my mom drive, especially if we were going different, places in the city or whatever. My dad would usually drive in. And something just told me to hold on to this moment. And man, I haven't thought about this in a while. And I did. I held on to it. I think I wrote it down. And I'll never forget, he wanted to do so much. He was like, but this is what I can do. And he called up a good friend of his. I call him Uncle Ram. Called Uncle Ram up. And one of my other birthday gifts was the session stems to Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. What's Going On. So I got the session stems to that. And it was probably the most monumental thing in my life. I was so eyeballed, cried, so excited. And that was one of the last gifts my father gave me. He had this stroke on October 26th, 2016. I believe it was the 26th. Or the 28th, one of those days. And the same friend I told I had to be quiet, when he had the stroke, our lives changed. I had just spoken to him earlier that day. He was laughing, he was joking, he was fine. Then my mom's like, call your father. I can't get him. He was on the phone and he said, I'm dying. And I was like, oh my God. I started freaking out. I was at Berkeley. I was teaching at the time. I was in the practice rooms. And again, I probably shared this, but I'm saying all this for a reason, because what your body and your mind goes through during grief, you don't know and recognize that you actually pre-grieve, and then you're going through the various stages as you go along, and your body and your mind, they're catching up with what you've already released. And then it's a defense mechanism protecting you for the next stage of what you're about to go through. I called, I screamed. I was like, I don't know if he's alive. Or I called my friend and I was like, I drove to the hospital, which was an hour away. To this day, y'all, I don't know how I got there. I don't know how I drove. I don't remember, but it seemed like I got there in 10 minutes. I got there so quickly. It's an hour drive. I showed up there and life as I knew it changed. Something came. That something came. And so it was in that moment until, 2019, when he passed January 7th, 1:52 p.m., 2019, that I was grieving. I threw myself into work. I was trying to figure out the next steps. I was just trying to figure it all out. I was grieving the fact that my dad could no longer play. He had no mobility. He had no mobility for a while. His whole right side he experienced paralysis in his whole right side. He couldn't talk, his speech. We didn't know if he was going to make it. The amount of things that we endured while he was in the hospital was insane. And again, life as I knew it and I anticipated it was gone. I was walking through the valley of the shadow of death. So for 2 years, we had to deal with the preliminary grief and grieving life as we knew it, life as we thought it was, grieving prophecies, things that had come to our family, things that had been spoken over our family, things that we were doing and working on. Like, I was finishing out my dad's projects because I just didn't want them to die. He was in what he was dealing with, and I was like, no, I gotta finish this because I'm not gonna let him go. Like, and I was working. I had my computer in the hospital room working day in and day out. And 2018, I got into a relationship with a friend of mine, known for years. And I'm excited. Like, there was an excitement because in the midst of this valley of the shadow of death, something that looked like a light came, and it brought hope and it brought strength. And I'll never forget feeling like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you. Because I also wanted to get married. I wanted to at least have my father be there. I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to walk me down, or if we have to roll him down the aisle. But I wanted him to be there, and this looked like this could be it. And I was excited. And I ended up having to grieve a relationship, grieve the expectations of marriage, the expectations of having my father there. My father passed, and I still remained in the relationship because I was holding on to a dream and expectation. And I was holding on to this longing of something that was familiar, and something that was tangible, and something that was somewhat fulfilling. I was numb. I was angry. I was hurt. I found out some news after my father passed about the relationship, and it broke me. And here I am grieving the loss of my father, but now I have to grieve what I thought the relationship would look like. I had to grieve the fact that we had moved, my family had completely relocated. I grieved the fact that my job, my financial situation, everything looked so different. And over 2019, over the past 6 years, God was like, let it die. Let it die. Let it die in my hands, and I will resurrect what needs to be resurrected. It's the hardest thing in the world. The anger, the frustration, the denial, the tears, the panic attacks, the anxiety, the sleepless nights, the physical pain that I endured from the grief of multiple things came. I grieved an identity. I was no longer living in the shadow of my father. I had to step up and become my own person, and I had to define what that looked like and what that meant for me, and what God meant that for, like what that meant to God for me. I didn't know. And it was painful. It was very, very painful. And I'm sharing all of this with you all because many of us go through periods of life where it seems like everything that could go wrong is going wrong. What we thought was supposed to happen doesn't happen, and it dies. We might have lost somebody, a loved one, a relative, a friend physically, and they transition, and the relationship and the love that you had and even the plans that you had with that person, they die. Many of us have gone through breakups, whether it be in romantic relationships or even friendships. It dissipates and it dies. I want to encourage us to be brave enough to go through the grief. Allow yourself to feel it. Allow yourself to embrace the pain, embrace the suffering, embrace the tears, embrace the uncertainty, embrace that this is going in stages. We know that there are stages of grief, but you're going to go through all stages, and you might go through them multiple times, because you're definitely dealing with different things. And you're going to go through it's almost like a canon, like in music, where you start one thing, or like a round, you start one thing and the next thing comes in and the next thing comes, but it's got to go around. Like, that's the stages of grief in life, and dealing with the different things that are happening in life and in these hard periods of time. But if you allow yourself to feel it, and if you allow yourself to look at the stage that you're in, process the stage, and if that means you have to get therapy or counseling, do it. Do it. I had 3 counselors at one time. I had 2. One for, at one point I had a grief counselor, and then I had grief counseling, I had business counseling, and like trying to figure out my life and like all the stuff and the responsibilities that I had on top of trying to heal. And like, it was like health, because I was dealing with flare-ups back to back, like bam, 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 with the fibromyalgia and arthritis, and it was just painful. And I started having like atypical migraines, which showed up like strokes. And because of what I dealt with both of my parents, because my dad had a stroke and then my mom had a stroke while my father was trying to recover and dealing with it, was just a lot, y'all. So I had 2 counselors for that. And then fast forward, thankfully, my church is so beautiful. And I love that my church believes in therapy and counseling and psychological help, because you can pray all day long, but some things mentally, it's not going to just magically go away. Like, you need to deal with this and process it psychologically. So I'm grateful that they helped me get therapy. And so I was going through this process of just navigating it all. My father passing, job transition, a crazy relationship, figuring out the next steps in life, my health, all of it at one time. And if you allow yourself to go through this process and work through it and face it and embrace it, you'll recognize the beauty and the glory of God, 1, 2, of yourself. It no longer becomes about what you do, more so than who you are. You start to recognize, wow, I'm really powerful. I'm really strong. I'm really resilient. I'm really crazy, but I'm really beautiful. I'm really grateful. I'm really powerful. Like, you start to recognize who you were created to be and the evolution process blossoms and it blooms. Just like the metamorphosis, like the butterfly, after it dies, the caterpillar morphs in the cocoon and it's hidden in its own coffin and it emerges into something else. But in order to emerge, it's got to break through and it's got to go through this process and it's got to crush out and it has to weather the elements and go through the storm in order to crush out and break out. And if you allow yourself to die and go through this grieving process and allow the things and the layers and the skin to fall off, the old layers of who you were and what you knew, if you allow it to fall off, the beauty of who you are in this next place is going to blow your mind. So I want to encourage you to process well, process strategically, and process intentionally. Feel it intentionally. Make yourself cry. If you do not cry, and if you do not scream, and if you don't allow yourself that opportunity, you are not grieving, and you are not grieving well, and you're not allowing yourself to feel what it is that you need to feel. And whatever, I know at one period, honestly, my sister did this and it hit me. Like, she just started writing because she couldn't get it out. And one day she just started crying and screaming and she just started writing. And it was just like writing everything. I hate this. I hate you. And then like she just started writing, and then she just bawled. And in that, it was a release. That's what we need. I began to write, and a lot of times I couldn't verbalize my prayers. I would write them out. And it was, and me writing out my prayers, that so much came out. Like it just came out. And we need that. We have to detox in the process of grief. You have to be brave enough to feel these stages, let it go, let it die, let it be. Embrace it, breathe, look at it, and as you keep walking forward through these stages, it gets easier. You go through, again, like I said, it's through stages and it repeats itself sometimes. I'm still grieving, but it looks different now. I can think about my father and I can say, okay, I love you. I can smile. You know, it's a different stage. And there's some days I still cry. But it's the pain, because I allowed myself to face it. The pain isn't as heart-wrenching. With the breakup and the relationship, the expectations and all that stuff, I allowed myself to face it last year and go through it. I was angry with myself for a lot of different reasons, and I allowed myself to feel that and then give myself grace. And so now I look at and I can say, I bless that person. I love them, and I'm grateful for the person and the part and the role they played in my development and my growth. And that takes healing. That takes facing it. It takes you going in and burying yourself and then allowing the phoenix to rise from the ashes. So be brave enough to grieve. I'm going to share some tips about and just some practical steps as we move forward on how to do it, and just steps that you can take. But one of the things I want to really, if you are dealing with this and you have not dealt, if you've had a loved one pass, or if you've not dealt with or seen a therapist, I would highly encourage you to look into ways to get some sort of help, even if it's 1 or 2 sessions, just to get started and get some professional help to walk through it and work through it, is so necessary and it's so beneficial. And I will see if I can provide some resources for you to walk you through the grief process. And I think I'm going to stay on this for a little bit because I feel like in order for us to fully emerge and evolve, we have to be willing to let some things go. And we have to know how to do it well. And we have to let the images and the ideas of what we thought it needed to be and look like, we have to let it go. So, yes, this is the first of the Be Brave Enough to Grieve mini-series, all right? I love you tremendously. And if you have any questions or if you want me to pray for you or whatever it is, please know that I'm here as encouragement, as a sister, to walk you through it the best way I know how. And yeah, we're in this together. Be brave. Embrace who you are now and all that you're becoming to be. I love you. God bless you. Take care.